Welcome to
4Kids Flashback. Hello, 4Kids Flashback listeners. We have such an interesting, weird treat for you today. This episode is called The Kids of 4Kids. And I'll tell you why. We are talking to Rena Taylor and Samson Opedisano. I think I said it right. And so they are kids who grew up with parents who worked at 4Kids. And what we haven't had on the podcast yet is this whole experience for kids in general from a kid's point of view. So let's just get into it. Hi, Samson. Hi, Rena. It's so good to see you guys. Thank you for being here.
Hi, podcast listeners.
Hi, listeners. Well, you guys look too cute, so I'll have to take a screenshot and share it. But Samson, I don't really understand what your dad's job is there because it was very corporate. So can you explain who your dad was and what he did there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question because I was like grappling with this and I like could have asked him, but I was like, let me just see if I can remember.
Okay.
So if I remember correctly, he worked kind of in the department where they were responsible for every time like a new episode would come out, whether it was Pokemon, it could have been Yu-Gi-Oh, it could have been Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He kind of oversaw the process of making those videos get digitized, and then they would end up on the DVDs that would be sold in like Walmart or Target or like wherever you would get DVDs. So it was like, or even like VHSs at a certain point. So it was like
Right.
each it would be each DVD maybe had like 3 episodes on. So he was responsible for making sure that volume 1 had, these correct episodes and they were, properly formatted so that they could be distributed. So he kind of like did all of that with a variety of the shows and products that 4Kids had.
Okay. See, that was someone I
Wow.
never came into contact with at 4Kids. Unlike Rena's mom, I could do this part, but I'm going to let you explain who your mom is.
My mom's Veronica Taylor. She did a lot of the acting at 4Kids. So she was like Ash on Pokemon and May and Ash's mom. She was on, I think, most of the cartoons at 4Kids. She did something.
She was there the whole time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I would come to work with her most of the time after school or when I didn't have school. So I would get to sit in the studio and kind of hang out with that.
I don't know if you know this, Rena, and I've said it before, but my very first day of Pokemon, working on it, I did meet you because you were in your mother's belly. And, yeah. And I was scared to death. I was there early, and because I got there early, I'd never dubbed anything. And there was this beautiful pregnant woman in the booth doing the voice of a 10-year-old boy. And I was like, what is happening?
I know. That is the thing is I was thinking about like, what do I remember from this time? And so it's interesting because I was born at the end of the first season of Pokemon, so in 1998. So I was little.
Yeah.
So like my memory of 4Kids is, I've got some very distinct things that stuck out to me, but most of it I don't fully like.
You were a baby.
I don't know. Yeah, I would just come to work with my mom. So it's kind of cool to be talking about it.
It's funny. I remember you when you were little and you would come into the recording studio with your mom because I was lucky enough where since my dad was there, my dad would let me play hooky sometimes and I would just like see who was on the schedule for the day of like recording and I'd see your mom and I'd be like, oh, let me go in, like, Darren Dunstan's is like doing the directing, and then she would just walk in with you and we would just like sit on the couch and watch and like it was just so like I have distinct memories of you, but I was like thinking about it the other day. I was like, she does not remember me because like I don't know, we're like 10 years apart probably at this point.
Yes.
So
well, that's what I was going to ask. So you were like a 10-year-old whose dad worked at this super cool place. Is that basically the gist of it?
Pretty much, yeah. I think he got the job when I was in elementary school. And back then I was like, I think when he was interviewing for the job, he like finally got it. He was like, so I'm going to work for the company that does Pokemon. It's like, I don't know, I must have been like 11 or 12 at most. And I was like, this is the best day of my life. And he's like, also best day of my life too. Cool. Like,
that's awesome.
So it was great. Yeah, it was fantastic. So
did you get like street cred at school for that?
Oh, I'm still getting street cred because that's the funny thing. Like when I was like that age, it was like perfect age for somebody like me to be like, oh, this is so cool. And then through high school, it kind of like waned because everybody's like, oh, it's Pokemon, whatever. And then in college, everybody's kind of like reminiscing about their life. And then
Mm.
when I would say like, oh, my dad worked for 4Kids, they would like freak out. And like to this day, anytime if somebody mentions like it in conversation, like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh, I'm like, well, fun fact. Like, and I just drop it and they're like, tell me everything. And I'm like, oh, I knew like all the voice actors and da, da, da. And they just think it's the coolest thing. Yeah. And then also John Siegler, who did
All the
he did a
music.
lot of the music.
Yeah.
All the music. He lives in my town. So my dad and
Oh,
I used to take the train with him. Yeah. So he lives right by my high school.
Wow.
oh, I
That's
love it.
crazy.
Yep.
And
Which is so funny because nobody cared in my life.
really?
Nobody.
Really?
Nobody cared. Yeah. So
Do they
I
care
remember,
now?
yes, yeah. So I mean, when I was little, I remember distinctly like this group of kids playing, they were like playing with the Pokemon cards at school. And I was like, okay. And I think I might have
Mm-hmm.
been, I don't know, it might have been like first grade. And I was like, this is my time. And I went up and I was like, yeah, so, my mom like is the voice of Ash on Pokemon. And they actually like looked up from the cards and went, okay, and then went back to playing. Like, and so like nobody cared. And so, I mean, luckily it was fine. And so
Do you
I
think
just
they
didn't tell
didn't get
anybody.
it? Do you think they didn't
I have no
really?
idea. I don't know. I didn't try again. So I
Right.
never tried. I never told anybody. And then,
Oh,
and it just like didn't come up. I just
well,
was like, because
you were
also,
not a braggy kid. You weren't like an
no,
obnoxious kid either. Who like you were just like being friendly. Like I've
yeah.
known you
I
most
just
of
was
your
like, this is
life.
awesome. This is awesome. And I mean, I think the thing is too, like my mom would come on field trips with us like all the time. So
Hmm.
my friends and people at my school just really liked her.
Hmm.
They just like really liked her, and I don't think they really knew what she did. Like when she stopped taking the bus with me, my friend was like, "Where's your mom?" I'm like, "Well, I'm here."
Yeah. What do you mean?
Yeah. But people in like high school and college, people started caring about it.
It's a weird thing
So,
too
yeah,
because
it's
like
just funny.
for both of you, I know when I do conventions, there's a weird disconnect. Like I think around 6 or 7 is when a child understands that there's actual people doing the voices. And
Hmm.
I don't want to, sometimes a parent will come over and be like, tell them what you do. And I go, I don't, I will because you're here and you've paid to come to this convention and I don't want to ruin it. But like, I don't want to mess up this kid's like, or I'll do the voice and the kid will be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, you sound like them. And I'm like,
Yes.
and I just, it's
That's my
not,
favorite.
it's
That's
cute,
my
right?
favorite when my mom will do like the voice and like a kid will be like, "That sounds pretty good."
Right. Or they do it back and they're
It's
like,
so funny.
no, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like,
That's
have you
that
thought about
too.
doing this
My mom,
professionally?
Yeah.
right. My mom sometimes will do like a voice and a kid will actually like jump back because they're like
Yeah.
shocked.
It's such a
So it's
great
sometimes
feeling.
you've got to gauge. Some kids are not ready for that.
Yeah.
And
Whereas
I
Samson
think
was
that's
just like,
okay.
my dad works at Pokemon. Check me out. Like it's a very
There were a
different.
couple of times over the years I brought friends to the office. Like I was very selective. It was like only like my close friends.
Whoa.
Like we come into
Hmm.
the city and I'd be like, we can go to the office, but like only for a little bit. Because it's not a playground or anything like that. I mean, it was a
Right.
playground when I was there, but if I was like bringing somebody else, I was like,
Mhm.
no, this is a very corporate environment. But no, I took a
That's so
couple friends
cool.
there. Yeah, it was great. I think the coolest thing I got out of it though was I have a binder of Yu-Gi-Oh cards that each card is signed by like Dan Green and Eric Stewart, like Dark Magician signed by
Oh,
Dan Green, like Blue Eyes White Dragon is signed by Eric Stewart. And so for some friends that were like really, really into Yu-Gi-Oh, I would for their birthday, I would get them a signed card of whoever they wanted.
oh,
That
you
was
were the
like,
shit. Yeah.
yeah.
See,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
actors were not smart enough to do any. Like, first of all, the actors were not like we never got swag. Like I never had
Mhm.
like a plushie. I think the corporate people had way more access to that stuff. And like Rena, like we didn't think of like signing a bunch of stuff for each other. Like it didn't.
No,
Now in retrospect, how dumb we were. I mean, oh
I
my God.
guess. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. Yeah. I have no idea. We were just in Japan, and even that, my mom and I, at like the last day of our trip, were like, "Oh, we should probably get some Pokemon cards that are
Right.
like in Japanese."
Right? Well,
I
we
don't
need
know.
to
It's
talk
just
about
not
because
something you
I
think
did
about.
that Okinawa trip last year, so we'll have a
Hmm.
separate
Yeah,
conversation about that.
that's
Like
for the bonus content.
oh my God, that I I loved seeing your pictures because it just brought me right back. And I'll just, for people who don't know this, there's a convention in Okinawa for the military. It's actually open to everybody, but getting to meet service members was like, I wish we could do more of that all the time.
I know. And I didn't know. I mean, they do so many events on the bases, and I've never been
Yeah.
on a military base, really, but like my great grandfather was in the military, and so like he still goes to like the commissary and stuff. And so it was just cool to like see, I don't know, it was just cool to be there and be a part of that because it's such a unique experience. So
well, and you've had
I'm very lucky.
such a unique perspective on all this because you've grown up going to these conventions with your mom. Like I didn't start doing these conventions till recently, but you've traveled the world like several times over.
Yeah.
Meeting the fans, which I think is just such a cool thing for like a young kid to see. And now as an adult, you're doing it. And also you have a podcast with your mom, which we are going to definitely talk about. But now growing up, did either one of you watch these shows for, like, what did you watch for fun? Or was it like, no, that's my parents' thing, I don't want to.
So I remember I watched my first episode of Pokemon before my dad got that job. That was probably a couple years before. And it was just like early morning. I was like, I think it started out at like 6 a.m. That's like the time slot it was. And my sister and I were up super early. She just like had it on. I was like, oh, what's this? And like that's how I kind of got exposed to it. With Yu-Gi-Oh, I actually got to see the first couple episodes before they ever aired. So that was another cool thing. I was always like multiple episodes ahead of whatever was on TV. So all my friends were like, what's going to happen next? I was like, I don't know. Y'all just have to wait and find out. Meanwhile, I'm done with the whole season. And they're just like, what? Yeah. So I remember watching like the first episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh because my dad brought them home and he was like, we're just going to like field test. Like, what do you think of this? And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Because I was also right at that age where I was still into Pokemon, but Yu-Gi-Oh was probably more captivating
you were perfect
at that
for
point.
Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I was not like, oh, this is my dad's thing. I was like, this is my thing. I want to be like, this is cool. Like,
well, you know, it's funny. A lot of the characters and cards on Yu-Gi-Oh got named after office employees, but I think your name might have been too difficult. Was it ever used in an episode? You know, your name is so hard to
I played
say.
a voice in an episode.
You did?
I played a voice in an episode. Yeah, I did. Yeah,
you
Mike
both
Pecorello.
did.
I was like, because. Oh
okay,
yeah.
Okay,
Rena,
tell your
I remember,
stories. I'm sitting back. Tell your stories.
No, so just over the years that I was going to the office, I think you spoke to him recently, Mike Pecorello.
The best.
I became very, very close with him. I actually taught him how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Every time I would go to the office, he would like on his lunch break, he would play around with me, and he only ever beat me once. And to this day, I was like flabbergasted that he won. To the point where we had to call in. I made him call in Sam Murakami, who was like one of the translators, but also like did all the like translations for the cards and whatnot. And we like had him come into the office, and I was like, I need you to tell me that I won. He's like, no, you lost. Like there is no way that. And I was like, there's no way Mike won. Like this is impossible. And I remember until like he left 4Kids, he'd always just hold that over my head, and I was like, fine, you can have this one. But because I had gotten close to him over the years, I just asked him one day, like very offhandedly, like kind of semi-joking, like, oh, can I play a voice? And he was like, I mean, sure, if you want to pick a background character, go for it. And I was like, wait, you're joking, right? And so I picked a character. What character was it? It was, I don't know if you'll know this, but it was, so he basically was like, do you want to play a monster? Like, what do you want to do? And so naturally me, you know, being like a 10-year-old boy, I was like, no, I want to be like this card called Injection Fairy Lily. And it was like this girl that like is in like a Candy Striper outfit. She like rides around she has a giant like syringe. Like she was super powerful. So I was like, no, I want to be the strong character.
Say this name slowly.
It's called
Injection. What?
Injection Fairy Lily. I know, honestly, it's like you're like that. Yeah.
That doesn't sound tough at all. That's what I love about it.
She had I don't even remember what she did, but like
dangerous.
in the episode.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But no, I did that. I did a couple of voices, and somebody was able to get my name in the credits. So my name is somewhere in multiple episodes at the end. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Yeah.
Well, you know why? Because
so awesome.
We haven't been able to figure this out yet. But one of the things we want to understand is that if you worked on an episode of a show, your name was in the credits for like the whole friggin' season. Like if you directed one episode or you like, because they didn't change. And I don't know if it was just a time thing or like if it was a financial thing or why they That's why nobody knows who played what in any show.
Yeah, because it's just a list.
It's just a list. So Samson, you're going to have to send me out. We're going to have to get you on IMDb with the exact thing, because we're trying to update this stuff to make it accurate. Because it's, well, first, because I mean, your mom too, I'm sure, gets sent sound bites of things like, hey, is this you? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe. Like, even if I hear it, I don't know. So
yeah, most of the time when she can, if both of us, if we can hear it, we can kind of know.
Okay.
But there definitely are some things that are on Wikipedia and stuff that are not real. So
yeah, and I'm trying. I mean, I'm trying slowly to. Okay, Rena, same 2 questions for you. First of all, did you watch? And I know you were when you were of TV watching age. Did you watch any of the shows? Okay, what did you watch?
Oh yeah, yes. Pokemon was the only show I was allowed to watch before going to school. And my mom and I like to joke that like I could only watch cartoons that she was in.
Right, of course.
But she watched them with me. So anyway, I watched that before school, and then I mean I loved Winx Club. I loved Winx Club.
The music is so good.
I loved when they would transform and they would do that whole thing. And I honestly, like, that was my dream, was to do that. I wanted to like fly up. I don't know. And one time,
how's that working out for you?
I'm still trying. I think, they do that like trapeze, like rope class, sort of, where you can get on the rope.
Oh, that, yes,
and twirl. That I think is as close as I will ever get to being a Winx member. And I will do that at one point. Not yet, but I will. But one time my mom and I were at City Opera thrift store in New York, and we found 2 Winx Club costumes. So I got a Stella, the Stella who's blonde, who is my favorite, obviously, because she's blonde. And I got the main girl who has the red hair, who I can't remember. I can't remember her name.
We'll look it up,
which is embarrassing.
Don't yell at us, Winx listeners. Club. We'll find out. Yeah,
it'll come to me. But yeah, I loved all those. My mom and I love cartoons, so we would watch a lot of cartoons and Turner Classic Movies. That was kind of the 2 buckets that we would.
It's a healthy balance. Yeah,
it was good. I had Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and then I had Winx Club. So
okay, so now
I loved all cartoons. So yes, I watched.
Okay, and then the other part, I know you did voice something just like Samson did. Yes. What was that?
I am most famously known for being the voice of Sentret in Pokemon. It's like a little rabbit thing.
Let's hear the voice, Rena. Let's hear the voice.
I think it's like Sentret. I think that's it. But I was 4 years old. So so I think I was in the studio, and as a lot of things, they say, oh, we need this voice. And my mom probably was like, oh, Rena can do it. And so I went in and she held me up to the mic and I did the voice. And then she did it. And I think they melded our voices together. So in some, it's like a Sentret farm. I remember.
Right.
Of like,
there's a million
all
of
these
them.
Sentret jumping. Yeah. So I think from what I can remember, I am some, my mom is some, and then some are like our voices.
I vaguely remember Sandra. That's what's so crazy is that like we would just kind of fill in for each other. Like we all had our main Pokemon, but then like sometimes we're like, okay, you're here, just try to sound like this.
Yeah,
it was very weird,
crazy. And rewatching it, you can kind of tell. Like in the first episode of Pokemon, my mom was Goldeen, but then Goldeen comes back in like a few later episodes, and you can tell it's Rachel.
Right. That's right.
And so it's interesting when you're like watching it, you go, oh yeah, that's so and so. So it's kind of cool.
So Rena and Veronica, her mom, are doing a podcast called The Trainer's Guide, where they are going back and watching and talking about episodes of Pokemon, which I love because I can't watch myself. So I just listen to them talk about
nice.
it. But I have to tell you, Rena, 2 things. First of all, it's so sweet the way you guys are doing it. I feel like you understand now what I feel like when I'm on a panel with your mom, because your Veronica is so sweet and earnest and positive, and you and I are a little bit more cynical, sarcastic.
Yeah, and she can be too, but she's definitely like the way she is on stage is how she is at home. She's very genuine.
And I'll
Mhm.
say something and then she'll be like, but it's really about family.
Yeah.
Or like, and I'm like, oh my God, she's so right. I'm such a jerk. So I love the two perspectives of you guys
Mhm.
because like I was just listening to the Bulbasaur and the Hidden Village episode.
Yes.
And you're like, they're gonna fall in the holes. And your mom's like, but you
Yeah.
have to be careful, or whatever.
Right,
It
right,
was
right.
like,
I know it is true. We're good balance.
it's
We've
so
got
sweet.
some good laughs. But I'm glad you enjoy it because we're constantly like, oh my God, does anybody want to listen to this?
Well, that's
So
how I feel about mine too. I think we all, I mean,
yeah.
uh, so okay, so Samson, I have another follow-up. So you
Yeah.
clearly had access to a lot more fun stuff than we did. Do
I
you
know, I'm
have,
jealous.
I am too. Do you have any of it still? Like, what do you still have from those days?
Let's think. Like things that I was like I got from the office, or
Yeah,
just
like
like
the
the whole
Yu-Gi-Oh
like.
cards are a big one. That's obviously the signed Yu-Gi-Oh cards are huge. Is there any other like swag your dad would
So
bring
the Yu-Gi-Oh
home?
cards, yeah, those. So I mean, kind of like what you said. I very rarely did I ever get swag of any sorts. They had it at the office. Very, very, very selective about who they would give it out to. So it would be given out to like maybe like prospective clients or like whatnot. So there were a couple of times that I definitely got packs of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but I want to say that that was maybe the extent. I
Okay.
there were a couple other things that like my dad would get through clients or potential clients that were like gifts that they were giving to him specifically. Like, so it could be like an action figure or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think I have a couple of those still. I know when Mike, probably one of my favorite things that I have is when Mike Pecorello was leaving 4Kids, he had this little action figure of like one of the Yu-Gi-Oh monsters in his office. He had like a whole collection of just like action figures and like little things that he got.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked it over the years. And I would always just pester him and be like, can I have this? Can I have this? And he was like, and of course I'm like 11 years old. And he's just like, no, no.
Hmm.
You're like, if one day when I leave, and then one day he was actually leaving. And I went into his office and he was like, you can now have it. And so I still have that little
Wow.
like
He's
figure.
such a
Yeah.
good dude, man. Even the fact that he remembered, what a.
Yeah.
I'm realizing now too, and maybe you guys probably knew more people than I did because I moved it in 2005. But how many fantastic people were working in this office that I never got to know?
It was
I,
so
Hmm.
nice.
ah,
Everybody.
Yeah. Do you remember Bagel Fridays?
Yes. Oh my God. Absolutely. They would
what
just bring
about
in massive
That's
baskets of bagels. Oh,
Pizza
yeah.
Wednesdays? Pizza
yes. I
Wednesdays
remember
because the
those.
Turtles were
Yeah.
recording.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember.
Oh, I
Yep.
didn't know
Hmm.
that.
Rena, you should. Well, maybe you were in school
Bagel
because I think
Friday
we
was my favorite.
did. Because your mom obviously was at all the Turtles recordings because
Hmm.
she was April. But you might have been in school because I think those were early recordings on Wednesdays. And
Yeah,
you
they might have
missed
been.
Pizza Wednesdays. How? Oh, what a shame.
I know.
They
I
were
only
good.
remember Bagel Fridays, and that truly was like one of the best days of my
Of the
life.
week. Yeah. Every
Yeah,
week. It was great. Yeah.
every week it was the best day of my life because I
Yep.
love bagels. And it would, yeah, there would just be bagels everywhere and like tubs of cream cheese, and I
Yep.
don't know, it was just really fun.
And let's
I
remind everyone
remember.
these are New York bagels. We're not talking about
Yeah,
somewhere else. We're talking about New York bagels. I love
totally.
that too because you know what? You're not the first person to mention it. And I love that, like, something about free food in an office delights
Yeah.
children and adults. Like, there's still something
I think it's
magical about
because it's an office. Like, I don't know. I love offices. Maybe that's also what started my love of being in an office, but I just love it. But yeah, I love the food. I love that you can just go into the kitchen and like
hmm
put stuff into a communal fridge. Like, that's just so cool. And like, you can order in. Like, whenever I'm at the studio with my mom and they're like, let's order lunch.
I love that.
That's so cool.
Do you think it's because
I
we
don't know.
don't
It's so
have
cool.
office jobs? Because I love that too. But
Yeah,
I think it's
probably.
because it's not my real job. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I loved when you go to a recording studio and or like a film set and they have every beverage you could ever want.
Yeah.
Ugh,
Hmm.
I had a couple, well, it wasn't that recently, but like I love beverages. Like I remember my friend came over and she's like, you must be the thirstiest person like in the world. But during the pandemic, I must have gone out and bought like 12 packs of all different diet sodas. And I came home with it and my neighbor looked at me and I'm like, I want it to feel like a studio. Like 'cause he actually understood he worked in it too, but there's something so cool
Yeah,
about that. All right. Well,
it is
okay. Now,
amazing.
yeah, The little things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone's still listening to this, but if they are, so are there, I know you guys have had some time to think about this stuff. Is there anything you want to bring up or talk about from the time there? Because again, it's such a unique perspective of this like office playground it must have been for you guys.
I mean, I have a
Yeah.
lot of memories, so I
Go
mean,
for it.
If Rena has any that she wants
You
to
go
share
first. I'm thinking.
No pressure.
Let's think. I mean, again, I have a lot. So I was also very close with Michael Hegney, and I remember when
Mm,
I first started going to the office, um, he would always like Michael's the sweetest man ever. He's like so funny,
yep.
he's so nice. But with me, he'd always joke and he'd be like, "What's another kid doing running around here?" Like he'd always like playfully pick on me, and so every time I'd go to the office, he'd see me and he'd be like, "Aren't you supposed to be in school? What are you doing?" Blah blah blah. And so then one day I remember what did he say? He was like, do you think this is like a playground? Like, you should go. He was like, draw up some plans for a playground that like a kid like you should be like in, like not in the office. So what I did was I was like, all right, I'm gonna beat you at your own game. I went around the office and I took pictures of different parts of the office and like created like not a PowerPoint, obviously, but in theory it would have been like a PowerPoint. And I basically was like, I showed him the like pictures of the kitchen. I was like, well, this is like that. This is the area where everybody would sit down and eat. Like, and I made this whole plan of how this office was a
Wow.
playground. And after that, he respected me so much. He was like, I literally gave you a task and you went to town and did it. And like, now I can't say anything. Like, so from that
Wow.
point on, he was just like, every time I saw him, he'd be like, oh my God, how are you doing? Like, it was just so funny. Like, yeah,
Oh.
it was really nice. And then I saw him like when I reconnected with you, he was at Comic-Con like 2 years
Yep.
ago. And I
New
went up
York
to him and
Comic-Con, yeah.
I went up to him and I was like, hey, like you might not remember me, but like Samson Pettisano, and his like jaw dropped. He was like, oh my God. I was like, I haven't seen you in like 15 years. Like,
Wow.
but yeah, I have a lot of good memories with like him and Darren Dunstan, Dan Green. I remember on my first day in the office when I went, I met Dan Green and it was like, that was a big deal because it was like, that's Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, oh my God. And I was like probably 10 years old and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I remember there was just also a couple like small moments where I think Darren was doing like a recording or he was directing somebody and I helped correct one of the grammar in one of the scripts because it was like wrong and
Oh.
they were like saying a line and they were like, that doesn't sound right. And I was like, well, it's not. This is how you would say it. He was like, oh, wait, you're right. Like, and then they went back and changed it. And then there was another episode where for Pokemon, what did they do? They like mispronounced Togepi's evolved form Togetic. They called it like something
Ooh.
else. And I didn't say anything. I was just like in the session and I happened to say, I was like, oh, Togetic. And they were like, what? And I was like,
Oh.
Togetic. And then I went, home. And then the next day my dad calls me. He's at the office. He calls me when I'm at work or I got home from school. And he was like, can you call Kathleen Boardland? She needs to talk to you. And I was like, what? Like Kathy was like, I think she was one of the producers for
Yeah.
Pokemon.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
call her and she was like, hey, so like I heard that you were in a session with Darren yesterday and you like said a Pokemon's name differently. We think you said it correctly and we were wrong. So we need to go back and change it. How did you pronounce it?
Wow.
And I was like, okay. And I'm like, I was probably like 10 or 11. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
the producer of Pokemon is calling me. Like, this is so
Oh,
cool. Like,
That's
but yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I had like little moments
wow.
like that.
Well, it
So those were
really
fun.
like points out like how crazy working at 4Kids was because again, there was so much going on, so many wonderful things and so many mistakes. Like, there's again, I think it was just because of the speed at which we were working. But like today, when you work on Pokemon, they have the pronunciations like ready to go. Like there's a database, there's a thing. Like Pokemon, we were flying by the seat of our pants a lot of the time.
Well, it's
Mhm.
funny you say that because I also remember like so to the example of like when they mispronounced a Pokemon's name, they're like when Pokemon first came out, they had like these guidebooks that you could buy like in
Mm.
Barnes and Noble
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, and it was like like basically a Pokedex of every 150 Pokemon, 151 Pokemon. It would have like their little descriptions, the pronunciation of their names, and that's what they were using to figure out how to pronounce the names. They were using some
Wow.
pre-printed
Wow.
material, and like I was like, oh, maybe you should just like ask the kids. Like, I was like, okay, but it was like, I mean,
Wow.
I don't think they ever got like anything majorly wrong in terms of pronunciation, but I just remember when they were recording that, I was like, that's not right. Like, and then
Well,
I
that's
mean,
so
yeah,
interesting because I always thought that the people who did like translated the scripts into English were the ones who came up with like the Pokemon names because it's different in Japan. But
Right.
that's so interesting that I mean, like, I don't know. There's just so much in that sense of the behind the scenes of how this all came to be that I
Hmm.
have no idea about. But
Well,
that's
and
so
there's
interesting.
the Pokemon company was the one naming them, but apparently, and we haven't gotten to talk to someone at 4Kids yet who had any input into some of the names
Yeah.
because I just found someone posted a poster where like some of the names that didn't get chosen were still on there of the Pokemon. Like there's names that changed
Oh,
in product,
wow.
like it just was all happening so rapidly. But I would love to know all of the like names that didn't
Who
make the
came
cut.
up with Licky Tongue?
Yeah, like
That's
stuff
what
like
I
that.
want to know.
Yeah. See, that's who I want to interview. But a lot of those
Hmm.
people are like from the Pokemon company itself, so I don't really
Yeah.
have like the easy access to them, but I want to know like the rejected names. Like coughing, was he maybe also like sneezy or I don't know, like something.
Bronchitis, like
Bronchitis, like bronchio. Like there's like oddish, was he also like ratty, like he looks like a radish, like
Yeah.
is there a variation on that?
I think
I
my favorite is how Ekans backwards is snake and Arbok is cobra. I was like, whoever did that, good for them.
Yeah.
Like
I
I give you
just
credit
found
for
that
that.
out.
Oh,
Yeah.
did you?
That is crazy.
Did you know
I
that,
You're
Rena?
learning
I
something new
just found
every
out.
day. I think I think in the span of time I probably found out like 2 weeks ago. Like I haven't
Right,
known for
right.
that long, but
Yeah.
I have known for a little bit, but I wouldn't have remembered that fact.
I feel so dumb
But so
sometimes.
I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah,
But see,
I just found that
I
out.
didn't know the Arbok thing. I've been playing Who's That Pokemon with people at conventions
Mm-hmm.
because for videos, and that's how I found about the Ekans. How do you even say? Now
Ekans.
Ekans.
you're going to be our pronunciation people. But I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even know the Arbok until just this minute when you said it.
Yeah,
Yeah, now
it's
I
crazy.
feel really dumb. Um,
No, you're just learning.
I'm learn.
It's a Pokemon journey, and
There
we're
were
all on
only
our own journey of
when there were
discovery.
only 150. I could handle it, but there's over a
I
thousand
think
now.
Ekans was in that
I
original
know.
though.
I
He
should have
was,
known it.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. I have no
But you can,
excuse.
it's okay. It's okay. There's still time.
Mhm.
You've
Thank
got
you
more
for
episodes of the podcast.
talking me
Don't
down,
worry.
Rena. Talking me down. Um, I want to ask a few questions and I want to talk about how this all like kind of affected you. Rena, this podcast, tell us a little bit about
Yes.
that.
So it's a rewatch of the first season of Pokemon. I was born at the end of the first season, so I haven't seen a lot of the original, like beginning episodes. And my mom was pregnant with me at the time, so she also doesn't fully remember a
Right.
lot because she was busy doing a lot of things. So we just thought it was a good thing. I mean, I think we go to a lot of conventions, and I mean, so the thing about us is that I've always come with my mom. I've always come to work with her. I've always traveled with her. It's always been us. And for a long time, I would come up, like if my mom's on a panel, I would be up there too. And you can find photos of this online of me just like reading my comic books while she's talking and I'm just reading my comic books. And it was the same thing. I'd come into the studio and I'd have my like, I'd bring my toys and I'd bring my coloring book and, I would just hang out. Or like even before that, my mom would bring like the bouncy chair that would hang from the doorway. And so she'd like attach that. So
Oh,
I would just like bounce when
oh,
we would be in a studio or something like that. So anyway, I've always come with my mom. We've always done things together. And recently I talk on the panels with her. So people ask me questions and you know, we've done this together for a long time. So
mhm.
we both kind of have interesting input. And I don't know, we just decided to kind of take that and bring it to a podcasting form. And then the cool thing is we're kind of traveling as we're recording the podcast, so a lot of it is recorded on the road. But yeah, so we're just talking about the episodes and the deeper meanings because there's a lot to learn and meeting people who have watched the show who were like 10 when it came out, it really affected them. And
Yeah,
you can people have taken away a lot of meaning and heart from the show. So
yeah,
I think we're just kind of trying to talk about that and bring that up, which has been really interesting. And I love
yeah.
it. It's been really fun. I know way more about Pokemon than I did before.
That's what I was going to say. I found that since starting this podcast, because I have new insights into all of this, my conversations at conventions are it just
Hmm.
completely different because I
Yeah,
kind of understand the fans' point of view more. Have you found that as well?
I think so. I mean, I like to talk to people,
Mhm.
period. And at conventions, it's no different. And so I will tend to like ask people questions. And so I've learned a lot about Pokemon in particular, but also I'm trying to learn some more about Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I've never watched that. That was a little too scary for me.
Even with all the
But
edits, it was still too scary for you.
yeah, it just was dark. It just was
Yeah.
dark. The colors were dark. And
And you'd be
I like Winx Club.
amazed. Right, right. But you'd be amazed. I didn't know at the time, like, how much they took out of those shows. Like, Samson,
Yeah.
did you know that at the time that they were making all these edits to shows? Because I really didn't.
Yeah, I think probably within like the first season, because like I would literally go in when I was in the office, I would like watch them edit episodes, and so there were some very like
Oh, wow.
specific scenes where it was like, maybe like the guy had a gun, so they had to edit the gun out. So some very like obvious ones, but then
Hmm.
where there was like
Mhm.
they'd summon a monster, and it was like there's clearly no clothing on this monster, and they happen to look like a person, and you're like you can't have that on a kid's show. So
No.
as time
Yeah.
went on, I was very aware that those were like big edits that they were doing, and I think on one of your recent podcasts, you were talking, it might have been to Mike Pecorello, the whole joke about constantly like turning everything into the Shadow Realm, like
Yeah.
where they just had to be like, oh, I guess this is just going to be another Shadow Realm edit, and they just like have to like blur things out and make it look like this spooky purple smoke. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Rena, so basically,
Whoa.
we couldn't talk about death at 4 Kids,
Yeah.
but Yu-Gi-Oh! Had like, so in early seasons, it was, I guess in season one, it wasn't that prominent. So someone said, let's call it the Shadow Realm, not realizing that the Shadow Realm was going to be everywhere. So Mike Pecorello, whoever leaves, and these next people are like, freaking Shadow Realm is every other word.
Yeah.
So it's just
Wow.
because, again, they didn't get stuff in advance or know where things were going, and a manga didn't necessarily always have all the answers, or it. It's been wild to learn all this stuff, but
It
I
was
love
also
that
just very
Yeah.
dark.
it
Like you
was
said,
very
Rena, it
dark.
was just very dark where it was just like there'd be episodes where if you watch the Japanese, it's just like these people they're playing a card game and like three of them are about to die. Like they're about to get thrown off a cliff or a building. And you're like,
That's
okay, this is a little
crazy.
rough. And they're like, it's the Shadow Realm. I'm like, no, that's like 100-foot drop. That's what that is. Like, that's not, that's a drop to the ground. Like nobody's going to survive that. Like,
And kids kind
Wow.
of can see through that, but again, they just, because of standards and practices, they just couldn't get away with
Hmm.
anything. I mean, there was in Yu-Gi-Oh, I'll have to send you guys, like, there was a total penis monster that they had to like edit around. Like it's the most
What?
phallic thing ever. I have to find it for you guys. But
Whoa.
and like, I mean, there was one guy who was always just covering up cleavage in the shows because it was just too much for Saturday mornings.
Wow.
Yeah. The cleavage
And
cover,
yet
we call
it
him.
still went on TV. I
And
think that's kind
worked.
of cool. I
Yeah.
know, and that's the thing. Like people are upset about like the 4 Kids One Piece, and I think it's definitely because
Yeah.
they edited a lot of that, like scrubbed a lot of that out.
Hmm.
And I think I don't know. On one hand, yeah, it's not the original, and it's not really what the show is. But on
Yeah.
the flip side, you got to watch something, and you were
That's
so
it.
interested that then you found the original. And so it's kind of a cool thing that it's
Yeah.
giving kids like a taste of what's out there.
Exactly. I think what happened with One Piece is, and we talk about this, we talk about One Piece a lot. And Norman even said, and Norman, when we interviewed him, said we never should have acquired it. It was so targeted at adults. There was so
Yeah.
much hype for the like otaku, for the hardcore fans, about One Piece. So they were so excited to see it that by the time they got to, because it wasn't like today where you could watch the original easily, and this
Yeah.
was their only way of watching it. And all these changes had been made, and it was like over the top the way that 4 Kids did things. And again, like it was a style for children. So
Hmm.
those were the loud, outspoken people. The kids were fine. The 6-year-olds were fine watching it. Um, but they did try to correct all that by doing like some uncut DVDs of things. And I think if maybe they had sold better, there would have been more uncut DVDs of a lot of different shows, but they just weren't making the money. But that's a whole
Yeah.
other 4 Kids podcast.
Crazy.
You both, before I let you guys go, you both are creative humans, and I'm not going to say it's all because you grew up around this, but I'm sure it influenced you. How did growing up around that space help you make decisions later in life about I mean, Rena, you're an artist. It's awesome. And I know,
Hmm.
Samson, you and I were talking about you wanting to find a more creative outlet. Do you think that's a result of being around? I mean, it could be completely unrelated, and I'm just trying to make connections that aren't there, but I'll let you guys talk about that.
I think so. I mean, luckily most of my family are all creative, so I've always had support for whatever I wanted to do. I think going to work with my mom has always been really fun, and getting to see the different jobs that people have and like that you can do, especially for kids. They were doing all of
Mm,
like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in-house. So
yeah.
you could go and see the artists. And I remember like walking through and looking at their cubicles. And I'm sure that that influenced me.
Yeah.
And seeing, I don't know, I love, I love being in front of the camera and behind it. So I think it's really cool to like see all the different um, ways that that's possible. And
Yeah.
I would even just take a step back, even talking about like Michael Hegney talking to you and listening to your whole spiel about how 4Kids is a playground, Samson. Like that's amazing, the amount of support that everybody had. And I
Hmm.
think that even to this day, everybody who worked there is so nice and
Yeah.
genuinely cared about you and
Yeah.
wanted to hear what you had to say.
Yeah.
And you're a kid coming to work, but you're still like valued. And I
Right.
love seeing people from especially that time because they're so wonderful, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so good to
Yeah.
see you, what are you doing? And so I think being supported in the workplace and then also at home definitely helped to reinforce that idea of being creative and just following your dreams. So yeah,
Talk
I think
about
it was an
plug
awesome
your work a
place.
little bit because you're such a great artist. Tell people
Oh
where they can
gosh.
see your work.
Oh, thanks. So I'm a painter. I do a lot of drawing and painting. So you can follow me at Rena Paints, RenaPaintsSSS, four S's.
Four S's.
Yes, because my original account is Rena Rocks with four S's, and so I figured I might as well just keep that theme going. And then yeah, I'm trying to share some more. I'm doing some commission work right now, which is
Great.
exciting. So that's been really fun. And then I'm putting my stuff on galleries and you know, who knows what.
The
So
life of
that's
an
kind of the best
artist.
place. Yeah, I just made a website, which is super fun.
Where is that?
So I'm working on that. Well, it's not
Okay.
fully out yet, but the domain should be Rena Paints, probably with one S, so you don't get
Okay.
confused. .com, but I'm working on it. So yeah, I'll be posting updates on what I'm doing
A-
there. And then I'm traveling with my mom, so you can see us on the road too.
And the podcast, obviously, we'll make sure we
Trainer's
have a
Guide
link.
Pod.
Yeah, Trainer's Guide Pod. It has different names on Twitter and Instagram. We'll make sure we post all that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Samson, tell us about your creative goals.
Yeah.
I know we were just talking about you're figuring out some life stuff, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
great. And how has the creativity entered your
I
life?
mean, I think very similarly to Rena, like I grew up in a creative family. So my sister was like a singer-songwriter. She plays like three instruments. My mom and dad both worked in the film industry. And then my dad obviously continued into that, having worked at 4Kids. And so I was just like always exposed to that. I was always like, I was never that kid that like wanted to play sports. I was more like, I like to draw. So when I was
Mm,
younger, I drew a lot. So like Rena said, when they did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in house, like I would spend a lot of time with the artists and just like hang out with them and watch them, and I would like sit and draw with them. Like they'd just be like, "Here's a free desk, just like here." They would give me things to draw. Like it
wow.
was like super cool. So like again, to Rena's point of like it was just such a supportive environment. And I mean, I have distinct memories, Rena, of seeing your mom because when I was younger, I would do a lot of creative writing, and so she would
Mm-hmm.
always ask me. She'd be like, are you still writing? She's like, she had read something that I wrote once, like years ago, and she was like, this is
Yeah.
really great. And she was always very supportive. And it was just funny
She
because,
loves you. Even now, she's like,
oh,
oh
oh, but it's so,
Oh,
yeah, it's so funny though, because I think the first time I'd seen her in like, years was Comic Con, New York Comic Con, like 2021. It was like after COVID was still a thing, but like you could still go places if you
God.
wore a
Mm-hmm.
mask and whatnot. But so I went up and we're wearing masks, so she didn't know it was me. But like when I told her my name, she like freaked out and gave me a big hug. And then she told me to like come over to your booth after when everything was done. And one of the things she said to me, she was like, "Are you still writing? Like, what do you like?" So she remembers like.
oh,
And
Mm-hmm.
anytime a friend of mine has ever met your mom, they always say she radiates such mom energy. And I'm like, yeah, she's like the
hmm,
nicest
Yeah.
person ever. It's like so true.
yeah.
But no, it's like I definitely like, yeah, I grew up in a very creative space or around creative people. So that's always been something that has played a role in my life. figuring out what's next and, how I can incorporate that. But it's just, yeah, the people at 4Kids were just always supportive, like you said, even though it was like,
Yeah.
I'm just some kid, they were just like such nice people. And everybody was there because they wanted to be. There was nobody that was there because their arm was being twisted and they had to do it. You could tell everybody
Right.
cared about the things that they were doing, so.
And it was a young office. I think back now, and I thought I was an adult. I was in my early 20s, but I looked at a lot of them as adults, and now I'm like, oh my God, they were young. They're younger than they're probably in between our ages when they were in charge of some very big things that were.
Yeah.
So I give them so much credit for even just getting it done. And also, I think that's why there was that energy there. We're finding out that it was a lot of the writers, it was their first job out of college. I mean, that's insane, right? Like who? So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a bit, I didn't want it to get lost to time. Like, I feel like we have to have this conversation now because it's going to be a case study at some point. Like, how did this company function? How did it work? And if no one talks about it. So what a pleasure to talk to you guys and hear about it from a kid's point of view.
Yeah. Well, I will say just one shout out to Kathy's dog, Peanut.
Yes,
oh, yeah.
Peanut and Moose. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember the rabbit? Wasn't there a rabbit in the office at one point? Does no one else remember
Yes,
this?
no, I do remember the rabbit. I don't remember his name, but I do remember what hop around. Yeah.
Wasn't there
Peanut was a big
Millie?
part of my
Do you
life.
remember Millie the dog?
Yes.
Yes.
Was it Millie White?
I believe so. I think that was Michelle's dog, maybe?
Michelle, yes. Oh my God, it was Michelle's dog. Yes. Oh my God.
That was the first time I ever saw pets in an office. I was like, this is so cool. Yeah.
Oh,
and then
I love Peanut.
Oh.
Rest in peace, Peanut. I mean, I assume if Peanut's
Yes,
still
no.
alive, that's a medical miracle.
Yeah, no, Peanut I think passed away a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
Because Peanut would come to the Super Bowl, like the Super Bowl parties.
Oh.
I remember. Anyway.
Remember the Halloween costume contest parties that they would do?
No.
I was never there, but
I don't think we were invited.
No, they would just do a Halloween costume contest. And I forget what the winner would get. Like the winner would get something, and then whoever had the worst costume would win something as well. So it was a spectrum of do you want to go for the worst possible costume or the best possible costume? I think one year, I can't remember who it was, they won worst costume and they came in as a clothing hanger. And I was like, that's kind of awesome. But I don't know if that's good or bad, but they won something. So
see, I don't know if because I have pictures from a Halloween party, at least one or two. And I just have a fake mustache on, but I can't remember if we were at the same parties as all of the staff or if the actors had separate. I wish I could. I'll have to find someone who.
I mean, I was never at them. My dad would just
Neither was I.
Just tell me, yeah. So he was like, you can't go to that.
There was booze. There was a lot of booze happening at these parties. You two are not. No, it wouldn't have been a safe space for you two.
Michael would have been like, "This is not a playground. You cannot be here." Actually,
yeah.
You don't want to see those adults drinking. No. Oh my God, this took a weird turn. You guys, thank you so much. Check out Rena's podcast, The Trainer's Guide. Again, links will be posted. If Samson has any links, I'll make sure they're up there. But yeah, thank you. I'm gonna say your name right, Samson Opedisano and Rena Taylor. And
there you go.
That's a wrap on this episode of The Kids of 4Kids.
Woo!
Thank you.
Thank you.
4Kids Flashback is a production of Maji Media, hosted by Tara Sands and Steve Yurko.
Producers are Zach Logan, Tara Sands, and Steve Yurko.
For more information, go to 4kidsflashback.com. That is the number 4. And if you worked at 4Kids and have a story you want to share, please email us at 4kidsflashback@gmail.com.
You can find us on social media at 4Kids Flashback, and to listen early and ad-free, head to patreon.com/4kidsflashback. For podcast merchandise, find links on our website and Linktree.
As they say on every podcast, if you liked this show, please subscribe, rate, and review, and tell your friends, or 4. If you want to check out other Maji Media podcasts, go to Maji, MAJI.media. Thanks for listening.